This episode is brought to you by Indie Film Hustle TV, the world's first streaming service dedicated to filmmakers, screenwriters, and content creators. Learn more at indiefilmhustle.tv. I'd like to welcome to the show Jeremy Elkin, man. How you doing, Jeremy?
Hi.
How you doing, man? So I wanted to bring you on the show, man. I saw your film, All the Streets Are Silent, and it really hit a chord with me, man, because I was, like I was telling you before, I was raised in New York as a kid. So for most of the 70s and up until about 85, I was in New York. And my stepdad was a cab driver. So I would ride with him throughout Manhattan. And I saw hip hop coming up and breakdancing and skateboarding and all that. Washington Square, I was all in that stuff. I was a young kid at the time, but I saw it happening. So when I saw this, I was like, oh man, I'm back home. So how did the project get together, man? How did you put the whole thing together?
It's a big question. Which part of it?
Well, just in general, so what was the genesis of the project? Like, how did you, at what point did you go, I got to put this thing together. I got to tell this story.
Yeah. So, I made skate videos for a long time. And I made documentaries for a while, and I had always known that Eli Gesner had this magical archive based on his footage that was in his New York mixtape. And I knew that he was at the Stretch and Bob radio show a lot. I knew he was a club promoter, but I didn't really know the full extent until we started to dive in. Mm-hmm. So yeah, to be perfectly honest, I didn't know there was a story until probably a year and a half in to making it. Didn't really know if it was anything more than just a behind the scenes on how mixtape was made. Mm-hmm. And it really wasn't until we discovered Yuki Watanabe, who's the founder of the nightclub Mars, until we discovered his archive from the nightclub, that's when the story opened up.
Now, how can you explain to people the importance of Mars? Because I had Moby on the show a little while ago, and Moby talked about Mars like it was, the second coming. So can you take the importance of those years? Because it wasn't around for a long time. It was around, 4 or 5 years, something like that.
2 years.
Oh, it was only around 2 years? Jesus.
Yeah, it was midnight of New Year's Eve of 89, and it closed spring of 92.
Oh, Jesus. So it was only,
January 1990 to April or May of 92. I mean,
So a couple years, but it was such an impactful club. Can you explain to people what that was about?
Yeah, so it was actually not a hip hop club. Yeah. It was a club that had many different genres of music, and every floor was a different genre. That's how Yuki and Rudolph set it up. And Yuki was a DJ, and he was super interested in the youth. And so he set up this little radio station called Radio Mars, where he would record mixes in his little office. And he would audition DJs for the next week or whatever, right? And people would drop off demo tapes. They would come, do a session for him, and he would figure out who could pair with who and what floor they would go on and whatever. But it wasn't about hip hop until there was one evening, famously, when Beasley, who's a character in the film, found a microphone with Eli, the narrator, and this is in the basement. They had this house party in the basement. They plugged in the mic. And word got around that there was a mic where you could rap, because in the basement was house, but they were playing hip hop. They weren't supposed to play hip hop because it brought bad insurance, whatever. And Yuki didn't want it because it meant gang violence. But they started playing De La Soul and Tribe and Black Sheep, and not Black Sheep, that was later. De La Soul and Tribe and Jungle Brothers and those guys, all the native tongues. And they had a mic, and Run DMC showed up, and and we're like, this is how you rhyme, kind of thing. And I think just word got out in the community that there was the ability to go to a club with a DJ, and you had a mic. So that's sort of that was the birth of, I think, the club blowing up, and that was within the first let's say 6 months of it opening.
And then I saw in the video in the film that you had some footage of JayZ, a young unknown JayZ just rapping on the mic.
Yeah.
That was insane.
Yeah, that was Yuki's wife actually filmed that. That was it was a crazy one. That tape was that's a whole other story of discovering the tape. But yeah, JayZ was, completely unknown, under Jazzo's wing coming up.
Right.
And Jazzo sort of gave him the chain that night to wear. And I think he just went off. And he had never seen that footage. We showed it to him maybe a year ago, and he couldn't believe it. He didn't even know anyone recorded it.
He didn't even know that JayZ ever played that clip, because obviously he didn't know who JayZ was, so he just was another rapper, right?
Right. I'm saying like JayZ didn't even know that it was recorded.
Oh, JayZ didn't even know it was recorded.
Yeah, no, he didn't know. But no, Yuki, yeah, he didn't know. These are all unknown rappers. It's like if we go to a club next week and there's a bunch of people rhyming, like
and then Eminem shows up.
We're certainly not going to tape it. And I think Yuki and his wife both had, and Eli as well, but Eli was a lot younger back then. But they had the foresight to record, every once or twice a week, they would record performances at the club. And that was just happened to be one of those nights. Yeah. And I think they only recorded that because if you watch in the film, the Jungle Brothers, he's kind of doing a dance.
Yeah.
And there's like there's an interviewer there from, I think, MTV or VH, something like that. And they're interviewing him. And so they were filming the Jungle Brothers being interviewed on broadcast TV. Like the cameraman was in there. So I wonder, I don't know, they were in there to record the Jungle Brothers as an interview in the club.
Right.
This is according to like what I've seen in the tape. I mean, Yuki doesn't remember. They don't remember. But I don't think the cameraman would have had I don't think they were recording all the musical performances that night. I mean, it was a lot of people going on. I doubt they got it in that quality. But, Yuki's wife Mayumi Watanabe was able to record it, and she labeled the tape Rap Street Style New York Group or something.
So it would have never been able to, like, how the hell do you find that in the probably thousands and thousands of tapes they had?
Yeah, so he was only giving me the tapes that were properly labeled, and then there was like another 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 tapes that were unlabeled. They were mainly house and disco and not really the nights. It was like a gay night, there was a this night, that night. It wasn't really like, it wasn't like a hip hop night collection. The hip hop was sort of embedded in the rest of the archive. So, they would make these highlight reels of each evening. So, for instance, one evening it was, I think the tape where the JayZ appeared that I saw a glimpse of him on was a mashup of a variety of evenings. And there was a glimpse of like 2 to 3 seconds at most mute of JayZ on the mic. And I called Yuki right away. I was like, where's the JayZ tape? What's that? He's like, he never played at Mars. No, he wasn't there. I would have known him, And I was like, no, I'm pretty sure it's JayZ. I sent him a picture and he's like, yeah, it looks like him. I'm like, no, it's for sure JayZ.
It's JayZ.
And he's like, well, I don't know. Like, it must be in an unlabeled tape, if we have it. Because those highlight reels, Mayumi and him were like doing the tape-to-tape editing or whatever it was called, where you would make like a highlight reel of a variety of tapes onto one tape, but you couldn't have, like, the audio wouldn't transfer with it. So you choose a song and then you would layer in footage, and that's what that was in. Yeah.
So you mentioned the Zoo York mixtape. Can you tell people what Zoo York was and the importance of Zoo York in this whole movement?
So yeah, Zoo York was a skate company founded by Rodney Smith, Adam Schatz, and Eli Gesner in '93. Adam Schatz and Eli had come over from doing Fat Farm, and Rodney was the founder of Shut Skateboards, which is the first New York skate company in the early '80s. And so they sort of combined forces after Eli had success with Mars and Fat Farm, developing Fat Farm under Russell. They got together, started Zoo York, and it was kind of like it was really like the first successful East Coast skate company, I guess you could say. Because Shut had some success, but it was definitely underground and more like transition pool skaters. Zoo York was really street, and it had like the hip hop roots, graffiti aspect with the tags. And yeah, it was a really like raw street brand that existed for about 7-8 years before it got bought by Mark Echo and became something else. But during those first years, 93 to 2000-ish, it was as good as it gets for street skating on the East Coast. And
then because at that point, basically West Coast owned the skating world. I mean, with Tony Hawk and the what are those guys called? Dogtown, Z Boys. Z Boys and Dogtown, and they kind of, I'm not sure who were they were the first to skateboard, right? Were they West Coast? Or is there a conversation?
There's a lot more crews. Like there was the EMB crew in San Francisco. There was a lot of amazing skaters in LA that were doing street skating, just like the New York guys.
Mm-hmm.
It just only the mainstream press was picking up Tony Hawk, the Z Boys, etc. But
right.
there were a million skate companies that were awesome on the West Coast. It wasn't like, if anything, the Tony Hawk, the Z Boys were seen as corny. And the Menace and some of the like girl chocolate skateboard guys, Spike Jonze's crew, those guys were like the skaters that everyone like looked up to, at least from the type of skating that I grew up enjoying.
Right, and then the whole skate scene in New York was a lot more. I mean, again, I was raised there, so it's a lot grittier. There's no palm trees. There's no beaches. You don't want to go to the beaches most of the time, things like that. So the energy was just so different. Now, at what point did the street culture combine with hip hop? Was that the mixtape?
I think there's a lot of examples of it. I think even going way back to like breakdancing circles and the projects in the 80s. I'm sure like there were kids with skateboards, and there was a DJ in the park, and there was a couple dudes breakdancing and doing graffiti. I'm sure it was always like part of one thing. I think it wasn't so like black and white. But I think the mixtape just like showed, as Josh Kalis puts it in the film, he says they showed how close they were in relation. I think, as opposed to like some like abstract archival photo from the mid 80s. I think just seeing a 40-minute version of that was way more impactful, and just the fact that like, clearly the guy, Eli, who was at the radio station, and the guy filming the skating, also Eli and R.B. O'Malley, you could tell they were using the same cameras. It might have even been from the same tape. So I think that's what really like hit home to people. It wasn't like they just scraped the internet for X footage and then paired it with the footage they were filming. It was all part of the same body of work. And that's probably why it hit harder,
Now, two of the main people in the movie that are in all this archival footage is Harold and Justin, who, gone too soon was lack of course, but their characters. Harold, he's a legend. There's people wearing his name, his face on T-shirts still, and he passed years ago. I knew him I was introduced to him for Kids. I saw Kids in the theater, and when I saw Kids, I was just completely blown away. Rosario Dawson, who's in your movie, I think that was her first movie, right? That was her first movie, was Kids.
Correct, yeah.
Can you explain? Can you explain first of all what Kids was, and then what that impact? Because Kids blew up in a kind of an underground world. It wasn't like a massive worldwide hit or anything, but it was a big thing, especially for basically a bunch of street kids, just running around skateboarding. What was Kids, and then how did that affect Harold and Justin as far as how did it affect their lives?
Yeah, so Harmony was in town. He moved to New York from the South, I think, where he's from, to attend college. Mm-hmm. I'd be getting this wrong, but I think like the New School or SVA. I think it was the New School. And one of his thesis project was the script for what became Kids. And Larry Clark, who was a seasoned filmmaker, photographer at that time, I think he saw something in Harmony, and he needed a writer, and Harmony was like, well, I'm basically, I don't want to get this wrong, but something like that, where they joined forces, decided to make this movie based on the kids at Washington Square Park. That's the gist of it, right? And yeah, they decided to cast, kids from Alphabet City and Lower East Side and Washington Square and Tompkins, East Village, and kind of create a film that was like just so real that it could have just been a documentary. That was I think the goal, but it's just about what kids get into in their everyday lives downtown New York.
And how did that fame and exposure affect Harold and Justin psychologically? Could you talk a little bit about that in the doc?
Yeah, I think it must have been pretty nuts. I mean, I don't think Harold was getting paid by Supreme. I think whatever board royalties and wheels and shirts, whatever he was getting from New York was probably maybe $1,000, whatever he was getting a month. They were not exactly like rolling in the dough or forget about profitable. They weren't really like recognizable outside of the bubble of like the the 100 skaters who skated in New York. Like it was tiny. Um, and then all of a sudden he was like at the Lowe's cinema on the big screen and selling out movie theaters. I think it's a huge change.
Right.
I think that, like, it must have really messed with him and Justin. I think with their psychologically, with their probably their like hopes and their aspirations of what they wanted to do as kids in the downtown scene, it for sure probably changed. And then they were also getting older, and I don't remember what year. I don't know. Remember how old Harold was when Kids came out, but he must have not been more than 20 or 21 years old.
Right.
Maybe he was 18. Or he was young for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, huge impact.
Now, when you approach this project, like I said, I've been editing for years, man. How the hell did you go? How did you approach this? I mean, you're talking about thousands of hours of footage on, what was it? High eight tape?
It's a mix of high 8 and mini TV primarily, and then there were like obviously photographs, 16 mil reels, 8 millimeter, etc.
How the hell did you? I mean, I'm assuming you had help, because I can't believe you did it all yourself. As far as just cataloging all this stuff.
Yeah, the cataloging was done by a few people who came in at the very start. It was definitely like 3 people, 1 or 2 of them a week for the first 3-4 months, and then after that it was really just me and my assistant Kyber who stayed on and helped develop it. We developed it together, I think, in terms of like figuring out A, B, C grade footage.
Now, as far as the story goes, I'm always fascinated when I talk to documentary filmmakers about you discover the story as you go along, and that's something that a lot of filmmakers listening don't understand on the documentary side. Like, yeah, you can maybe have a script, maybe you have an outline, maybe you have your thing that you want to kind of go after. But when you start, like, you meet that one interview, you're like, oh my God, that just took me off to a complete new direction. How did you approach the storytelling of this? I mean, did you, like you said before, it could have just been a behind the scenes of the mixtape. But once you've got that one interview, how did you kind of like structure it all? Like, how did you put it together, outlining it and stuff?
Yeah, so I think it's a 3-part answer. One, my boss when I was at Vanity Fair was the producer on the film, and he was at Vanity Fair for 25 years. He's an amazing journalist, amazing editor, writer. So working with him, the way that we work, it was just the same as what we had at Vanity Fair. So we work really well together, and I think that's part of the success of the story is the 2 of us. I think if he had just been, he's not a filmmaker, but if he had just been doing it on his own with someone else, maybe it wouldn't have looked the same. I think I would have gone a little nuts had I not had him. I think he really helped sort of like, I think he just, he saw the bigger picture, but he also let me tell it. It was an interesting relationship, like I think that's, I think, the bottom line here is that it's Eli's story. It's narrator Eli Gesner. It's his archival footage for the most part. Largely it's 60-70% of it. The film is his archive, meaning that I was trying to just tell it as he was, as what he was recording. So he didn't record Janet Jackson in Midtown. There's no Janet. There's certain things that aren't in the story that might pertain to like her dating Q-Tip or some weird other connection. Those are left out if we didn't have the footage. We weren't just like taking things off the internet and then figuring out how they were aligned. It was really like, what is the basis of Eli's collection, and how is there a story in there? That was first and foremost. And yeah, it's like, it's totally Eli's. It's what happened to Eli and also what Eli recorded. That's the result of the film. Like that's like the core of the movie.
What got you into filmmaking? What made you want to be a filmmaker?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, it felt like I never was like, I want to be a filmmaker. It wasn't like that. It was like,
You
I
didn't have
just,
pictures of Scorsese on the wall and shit.
no, no. I don't even, honestly, I've probably seen like 1% of the movies that most filmmakers see. Like, I don't like watch a ton of movies.
Mhm.
I make things all the time, and the medium is film, but I'm not like a student of film, like I probably watch a movie a month or something. And like, I don't watch movies.
Mhm.
I want to, it's just the medium that I'm using, it's the thing that I guess I'm good at, or is easy for me, and that's sort of it. So it's not like I wouldn't have like some big master plan to be like a director. It was never that. I never wanted to be a director. I always wanted to be a designer, and so it just sort of like fell into this.
Yeah, how did you fall into it? Like, what was was it a job because of Vanity
I
Fair?
just started filming. Yeah, I just started filming skateboarding in Montreal. Growing up in MTL, it was like there weren't many people who had video cameras, and I looked up to this guy Eric LeBeau downtown. Shout out to Eric's awesome, great dude. And he had the VX1000 Sony that I was like 12 years old, so I couldn't afford that, but he was, it's inspiring to see him out there every day. And I just was like, I want to do that, like whatever that is. But also, like, my friends were way better than me at skating, and they were doing tricks that were arguably better than what I was seeing in the videos. So I was like, someone's got to film this. And so, picked up a camera and then made one skate video and another and another and another, and then wound up doing things outside of skateboarding. And then sort of now we're here.
That's kind of like how Spike started, Spike Jones.
Yeah, a lot of, not just by like Ty Evans. There's a lot of amazing filmmakers that come from just,
the skate world.
Skateboarding, yeah.
Now, I always ask this question of my guests: what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
I think just like that things take time. Like, don't rush anything. I think that's the number one. I'm interested in how people connect and how things develop and how scenes sort of intertwine, and that's always been interesting to me. So, the film is a natural progression, but yeah, I think that's just, I would say just do something that you love and you're passionate about.
Do you have any advice for filmmakers that are trying to break into the business today?
Yeah, just meet everyone you can and be good to people, and try and make. The biggest advice that I would say is, like, if you're gonna make a story about a place, or if the story that you're trying to tell is in a certain place, like, live in that place. Don't make a film about Tokyo living in Australia. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not going to have the same texture or the same sound or the same feeling as someone who understands their environment, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So many filmmakers you're right, the Australian who makes a movie about Tokyo or New York and had never been there, and what they grab it from the internet or books or movies and things like that. There's nothing like actually living it, breathing it, being there, especially a documentarian. You've got to as a documentarian.
Yeah. The walking out your door, whether it's in New York or anywhere else, like, you kind of want the environment to inspire you. You want it to be like a constant source of inspiration, and, just make things in the same environment as your work. I don't know. That's like, take in the typography and the architecture and the smell and the pollution and the whatever element is out there in your city. Put that in the picture and in the sound. It's going to make a huge difference than if you're like, then if it wasn't in there, if you're just researching.
What inspires you as an artist, man? What kind of makes your juices flow?
Just honestly, like, opening the front door. That's like the best thing. Just going, I can just walking in one direction for like 8 hours or an hour, whatever it is. Even just going around the block. At least I live downtown in the city in New York, and it's like, that's the inspiration for me. I don't know. I like seeing just how different every second of every day is here.
And where can people watch the movie?
So the film is out. When does this air?
I think right before it comes out. So,
Okay, so the film comes out July 30th,
right,
nationwide. It's limited release in New York up until then. And then September 7th, it'll be out on digital platforms, on Apple, and I believe on Amazon as well. But don't quote me.
And what are you doing next? What are you working on now?
Working on a few projects that I unfortunately can't talk about, but exciting, super exciting stuff. Yeah.
Jeremy, thank you so much for being on the show, brother. I appreciate your time, and thanks for putting this together, man. This tells a story that hasn't been told before, so I appreciate you, man.
Thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it.